Okay, good morning and welcome. And maybe it's good afternoon for some of you based on time. I'm Yella Trask, Vice President of Membership and External Relations at MxD. MxD is Manufacturing Times Digital, and we are a public-private partnership manufacturing innovation institute. Our mission is to advance secure digital adoption in manufacturing to strengthen national security and economic prosperity. We work closely with our members, with our partners, with our government partners as well, and of course, our members like Boeing and Rolls-Royce, who are part of this panel today, to deliver projects and resources to improve the cyber preparedness of supply chains. When it comes to managing risk, supply chain resiliency and thus cyber security are critically important. I'm really grateful to our speakers and our moderator to have provided this opportunity, and would like to kick us off with an introduction. We have a terrific panel of experts. We've got Brett Cox. He is Boeing's DFAR Cybersecurity Program Management Office Lead. That's a mouthful. He's worked in IT, information security, cybersecurity, and risk mitigation for over 22 years. Brett has a Master of Science degree in cybersecurity and has been part of the CMMC certification efforts. That includes being a certified CMMC assessor and provisional instructor. Additionally, Brett teaches at the St. Louis University Workforce Center, focusing on cybersecurity and CMMC. As a veteran of the U.S. Army, Brett is a recipient of the Secretary of the Army's Patriotic Public Service Award. Thank you for joining us, Brett. Hamid Chaudhry is Vice President and Head of Cybersecurity North America and Defense for Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce has been a partner at the very outset of some of our programs, whereby we really want to look for ways that our OEMs and our manufacturers can really help their supply chain. An IT executive with multifaceted experience, Ahmed is a Washington, D.C. CISO governing body member and is on the Capital CISO Advisory Board. He's a certified CMMC professional and led multiple CMMC readiness projects with various aerospace and defense industry leaders in his previous roles. Mike Tanji is also joining us, and he is MxD's Director of Cybersecurity. So prior to joining MxD, Mike held Chief Information Officer roles at several NGOs. He began his career in Army intelligence and later served as an intelligence officer and division chief at the Defense Intelligence Agency, focusing on information warfare and computer network operations. So all of our panelists, they are going to be facilitated and moderated by Melissa Harris. She is Chief Executive Officer of Harris, and a really valued partner of MxD, who's working with us to deliver cybersecure supplier programs to all of our members to help increase the awareness and readiness of their supply chains. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Melissa and have us get started.
Awesome. Okay, folks, welcome, welcome. This is going to be high energy because we've got high stakes right now, but I want to first celebrate Brett Cox and Boeing. I want to talk about where each supplier is or OEM is in this process. And Brett, Boeing has that certification in hand.
We have their CMMC level 2 for our enterprise, and 2 of our subsidiaries have also achieved CMMC level 2.
Oh, that's amazing. And though you have 15,000 suppliers to go, it sounds like.
A lot of suppliers still need to be taken care of. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Job is not done, but congratulations on receiving that level 2 certification. Amit, over at Rolls-Royce, you are close. When do you think you're going to have that level 2 in hand?
So right now we are scheduled for a November certification with the C3PO, and we are working very closely with, so we hired 2 C3POs, one for doing a consulting for us, the other one doing the actual assessment. So we are working very close with the consulting C3PO to make sure we have everything that we need for the assessment.
Okay, so haven't done the assessment yet, but have the team hired, have them ready to go. And then Mike Tanji over at MxD, my understanding is that you have just hired your C3PAO and you are scheduled for an assessment in
April 26th.
April. Okay, awesome. So you're ramping up that journey to get yourself like done, get yourself assessed in the spring toward that. And so what I love here is we have three people, all experts, all at different places of the journey. So Brett, let me start with you. What do you wish you had known about this process when you started? That you found out it was a big surprise along the way that you wish you had known sooner?
The biggest surprise was that when we started preparing, we were used to the DCMA DIVCAC high confidence on-site assessments, which handled everything at the control level. And so we didn't dive in assessment objective after assessment objective. So when we first started preparing for our CMMC level 2, we took that same approach at the DCMA DIVCAC and focused on the 110 things, not fully realizing that we had to address all 320 very directly. And so we had to kind of regroup and reimagine what our system security plan looked like, and not understanding that our SSP was a policy level document. We always treated it as a repository for our evidence, but never as it is the plan for system security within the Boeing company. And that was a big change in our process, that it was a policy level document.
So, but by going from that to policy level, what, lots more approvals, thicker, longer, what, how did it change?
More authoritative statements, such
Oh.
as changing shoulds to must, or this is how we do things, to this is why we do it, and what are the instructions behind it. Such as scanning, doing full antivirus scans weekly, was that we had to define that we had always done it that way, but where did we have it written down that if all of us won the lottery and bought an island in the Caribbean, who coming behind us knew that they had to set it at 7 days? And so we put that authoritative statement directly in our system security plan.
Was there one of those 320 items that proved to be the most gnarliest? What was like the last one that was just like, oh my gosh, you're at the finish line and everything's done but this one?
Well, and actually it was the antivirus one, because we've always done it that way. But the question is where is it defined? Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean that we had an authoritative source that said do your full scans once per week or every 7 days. So we had to find some documentation from a previous build configuration setup and then use that, and then we modified our SSP after that to make sure that we never had that problem in the future. That one was a little problematic. I was caught a little by surprise by the fact that we didn't have the define. And that's another thing for everyone who's working on your SSP. Anywhere it says define or identify or specify in NIST 800-171 alpha in the assessment objectives, make sure it's written down in your policy, on your website, in some authoritative place, because they will ask for that reference.
I love that questions are already coming in on the chat. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to get through the first question, at least for to go to Amit and then to go to Michael on the surprise, but then I will go to the questions in the chat. Keep throwing them in there, folks. You guys are so lucky. We have like 3 people who know what they are doing. So we're really glad you're all here. Keep throwing those questions in. Amit, so what surprised you the most so far as you get close to the finish line?
Yeah, I think Brett kind of covered it. We were under the same impression of DIVCAC High doing the assessment for us a couple of years back, and going with the 110 assumptions, and then doing a deep dive into the 320. And some of those 320 requires your testing of the controls, and that's where we were like, okay, what are we missing in those tests, right? The other thing we found is that we have 2 C3POs working for us today, and then we have 2 RPOs, pretty big RPOs, not the small ones. When you look into how they interpret these controls, although there's a assessment guide and the cap provided by the DoD, there's still a lot of things that you want to check with them and make sure that both the C3POs that you're working with do agree with those statements. The one assessing you would not tell you if it would pass or fail, but they would give you some kind of guidance on it, and make sure that those C3POs do actually align with the methodology and what their approach is, right? So again, there's a lot
Yeah.
of interpretation on these controls still. The biggest
Yep.
thing we were caught on surprise was the encryption at rest and how much you have to do when it, like high performance compute, all those different areas that you thought would be okay. You have to kind of get that across the board.
Okay, so for Brett, it was the antivirus. For you, it was for Rolls-Royce, it was the encryption. And we're going to go back to this fact that you have 2 C3POs and 2 RPOs. So we're going to come back to that when we talk about who's been most helpful to you in this process. So we'll put a pin in that. Michael, what has surprised you thus far as you have just now, selected your assessor?
Yeah, probably the fact that there are a lot of you need a lot of inputs or evidence related to how you operate as a business that are not necessarily security things. Getting folks who deal with legal, administration, finance, making their contributions to the whole process, it can be challenging because they don't do security,
Right.
and getting them to understand, well, we all do security to a certain degree. So and this is, you might not do it in a particular fashion, but this is something that we need to contribute to this whole overall process, because failure, while an option, is an undesirable state to be in.
Yeah, on an earlier conversation, I had one supplier who failed their first assessment. Not fun. So we'll get to that in a second. But quickly in the chat here, is the frequency of your virus scanning activities considered an ODP, organizationally defined parameter? That is way above my pay grade, but does anyone on this call know the answer?
Yeah, in NIST 80171 revision 3, it is an organization defined parameter. So the DoD has released a memo with what their ODPs are expected to be. Of course, the contract will actually say the specifics in the future. Once we get out of the class deviation and move from revision 2 to revision 3, they're expecting that to be a 7-day scan, if I'm recalling the ODP correctly from revision 3 in the memo.
Another great question in here from Paul. How broad or narrow are the scopes of certification for the 3 organizations? I think this is probably a good thing for everyone to understand. Brett, why don't you talk about yours, and then we'll go around again in a circle.
We are enterprise for the Boeing enterprise and for both of the subsidiaries that have achieved their level 2. We focused on enterprise level CMMC level 2s.
Okay, and Amit?
It's the enterprise. And one thing I forgot to mention in the surprise was the definition around specialized asset, because that's something new. And again, you talk to different C3POs, they would have different views on what the specialized asset is. And for manufacturing, I think that's very important to know, because for us, the test beds and things like those, what part is specialized assets versus the IT? That's where the kind of the hard and the tough questions were.
And that's actually a really good point, because that's going to vary from a manufacturer to a software developing firm to a healthcare firm that has to meet the CMMC requirements as well. So those specialized assets are going to vary if you have everything from medical devices to, IoT, OT, GFE, how much you have on your network that is going to store, process, transmit CUI, or is connected to your network. A really great point.
Michael, for you, as you focus more as a consultant to the DoD, what is your take? What level? What surface area are you working with for your MxD?
From a technical perspective, we're focused on we have a dedicated enclave to handle CUI related information.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is going to be something we're going to dig into more here. I love the different approaches here. So this is fantastic. Okay, so Christopher, we have some great questions in the chat, so keep it up, folks. But so the SSP should be very specific, correct? Not just regurgitating the control. Oh, someone just posted another one. Hold on, you guys are really digging in. I love it. Okay, hold on. Not just regurgitating the control, i.e. not simple like we encrypt to meet the FIPS 142 requirement, but rather we are using BitLocker configured to encrypt data at rest using XST, blah, blah, blah. Is that right, Brett?
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime you're using encryption, especially the FIPS validated cryptography, is the C3PAO will ask for your package ID for that FIPS validation. So you're going to have that certificate number handy and provide that along with any caveats that are in the FIPS validated cryptography, such as that it must have the FIPS mode enabled checkbox. So they will review that certificate number and the caveats for any place that you're using cryptography to protect the confidentiality of CUI.
I love it that folks are even
get that
answering.
list going now.
Yeah, get that list going. And I love people are helping each other in the chat right now, folks. So can keep it up. I'm going to jump back to some of our questions, and we'll continue to monitor the chat. But we have heard over at MxD and in the supplier program that I help run, just the complaints over and over again about defining what CUI is. So can you help give some folks some clarity on what is proving to be, a significant headache? What advice would you give about how did you scope what counted as CUI in your environment?
Yeah, so I understand that confusion perfectly because I deal with it every day myself. So we have our enclave CUI information is passed there and dealt with in there. The problem that we run into, I think a lot of people run into, is that if you have a system that triggers on keywords or phrases, you're going to get a lot of warnings about CUI that is outside of your enclave, which is not necessarily true. You also get, the government does a lot of things in public that if you read the definition, it's like, well, that's CUI. This is public. The government's putting this out. That can't be true. There's an interpretation around that. So if it's truly public, in particular, like contract information or bid and solicitation related stuff, it's like, well, this smells like CUI to me. It's like, well, no, it's because it's in a contract site, it's in a public site. As of right now, this time in this context, that is not CUI. It's afterwards, right? Once you have your contract in place, once you're obligated to do certain things, then it changes over. So it's super tedious, like everything in CMMC. It is super tedious, and it's really a matter of context. And we've never had a problem or had any kind of pushback if there was any sort of question. Just reaching out to the point of contact, the government point of contact, and saying, "Hey, did you mean to do this? Did you?" And they clarify that.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on this, on the CUI, because this is the one that we've received the most complaints about. So jump in.
And I can speak a little bit to that, because each one of the branches, especially when we're talking about CMMC, is at a different level of understanding and a different place in their implementation of the CUI program within their branch or within their specific program level requirements. And sometimes we have to gently but firmly remind our government customer that DODI 5200.48, and unfortunately I know this section off the top of my head, 5.3 alpha states that they must tell us what is CUI in the contract in a contractual vehicle. That contractual vehicle, of course, as it also specifies in that DODI, is the security classification guide. Well, programs are in different states of their last security classification guide, when it was updated, how specific it gets, or that they try to put everything in one giant bucket and say, well, everything's CUI, which of course is not true.
Right.
So it is a back and forth. It is obviously working with the customer quite a bit and reminding them that they do have the obligation to assist us and let us know. But the primes also have the responsibility to flow that down to our subcontractors, so that way they understand the CUI that they're working with in their deliverables to us. So there is a tendency to sometimes overmark or sometimes completely undermark, because if one thing in that entire document is CUI, every single page is marked as CUI. Unless you have portion markings, you may not be able to easily identify what is and what is not CUI in that particular document.
Right. It's like when we get complaints from subs that they're like, nothing from Prime X, right, is coming with a marking at all. And it's like, well, that's probably because whatever branch that document is originally coming from isn't marking it, right? It's not that the Prime is failing to do it. It's that their customer is not telling them yet. They aren't mature enough in this journey.
And it may be the thing that you're inventing for the first time ever, that's what's going to be CUI. So you may have to be the first person to ever market as CUI because you're the first one to create it.
Okay. I'm in. Anything on CUI? Go ahead.
No, so our approach was we went contract by contract because we didn't want to leave, although we are doing the enterprise, but your CUI assets are very important to be identified, right? Because everything cannot be your CUI asset, and you cannot apply all the 110 to all the assets too. So we went contract by contract. The ones that did not have a DD-254 SCG, we again went back either directly to the DoD or to the Prime and say, can you help with this, right? And the more you talk with the DoD and the Primes, they will actually help you out, right? And we saw that the scope actually came down to what we understood was CUI initially, but then we started going back to the Prime and DoD and say, by the way, this does not like part number, does not look, it's a commercial entity that, or a commercial part that we use. Yes, it's for a specific one, but we use the same part in a commercial engine, right? So that cannot, and they started to understand and they said, yes, it makes sense not to mark that as CUI. So again, the more communication you have, and again, do that with your legal team, with your commercial team, so that it's something in writing. If it comes back, you have a trail off, you already asked them.
It's like a friendly negotiation. Sometimes the suggestion of like, hey, we think this is CUI, or you mark this as CUI and it is not, sometimes comes from the Prime. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then I have a question here in the chat. So let's just go into enclaves, because I think this is just basically, how do you handle the OT data connections across your enterprise? Are you following the guidance at 882 and building separate manufacturing enclaves, i.e. industrial controls networks, multiple firewalls, DMZs, et cetera? Who wants to take that one?
I can start with it. And so yes, we, again, this is not part of the CMMC, but I would say related to it. So we follow the Purdue model and kind of isolating those into the layers. And that's basically the guidance that we have from NIST to follow on the OT side, right? And that's where I was talking about the specialized asset, and you have to kind of work it out. And that's where some of the RPOs that we are working with, they specialized in OT security and all those. So although it may be scoped out for the CMMC because their specialized asset would not be kind of validated against the 110. But again, if you want to follow the right security path or the cybersecurity path, follow the Purdue model and work with an RPO. If you're a medium company, smaller may not be maybe expensive for them. But again, work with the RPO that actually can guide you through what those stacks and what those separation of the specialized assets versus the IT assets look like.
This is, I think, a good moment to just quickly check in with who's been helping you, right? So Amit, you have two assessors. One is a consulting advisory assessor. One is the real assessor. And I believe the RPO you told me was Deloitte and EY, or I'm trying to remember, who are your RPO?
Deloitte and Accenture.
Deloitte and Accenture. I was off by one. Deloitte and Accenture. Now, Michael, like MxD is obviously smaller than Rolls-Royce. So you have an assessor, and do you have anyone, just a little bit, do you have anyone else? You have an assessor? Are you going to have another consultant helping you, or you guys are going to do the rest of this internally?
We had an assessor come and do a gap assessment. So to figure out, we like to think that we are very close to knowing what we're doing. So we did a lot of the legwork ourselves, but knowing that we're fallible, we had somebody give everything the once over to make sure that we weren't missing a few things. We were missing a few things. So we're in the process of addressing those things so that we're ready for the assessment when it comes.
So you had a gap analysis done by an independent, and then you have the assessor. So, okay. Excuse me. And then Brett, like you actually says Boeing kind of was like the lead test case on this. So you all had some help from the government itself, correct?
Well, and that was the original when the CMMC, the quote unquote 1.0, out of the 7 pilot programs that were identified that were going to be the first CMMC, we were actually going to be going out of the gate first. It was going to be one of the CMMC, which was level 3 back in that day. And so we did have a little bit there. And then we really started focusing on our internal expertise. So we did have a consulting company that did the original gap analysis, and so we worked that with our own expertise. And that was when I became a provisional assessor and also a provisional instructor, and then eventually once the CCA exam came out, and now I'm a lead CCA and teaching CMMC, both the CCP and the CCA classes. We're in the middle of a CCA class right now, and we have a number of Boeing people that also attend that class so they can learn more about CMMC. So we really focused on building our bench internally, both within the programs and within our subsidiaries. So in the way we're preparing our subsidiary companies now is a group from my team is actually going and visiting the subsidiaries and performing mock assessments. So
Wow.
we are
Okay.
simulating the assessment environment. Some of them are ready for that. Some of them need workshops to help them get ready. But we've done that, and the subsidiaries that have succeeded have thanked us for the approximation of what the assessment is actually going to feel like. So we do interviews, we make them do the demonstrations, we try to simulate that environment as much as possible.
Got it.
So they know what to expect. Now, it's not always going to be 100% because every assessor is different, but I want to get them close. So, when they think about what that simulated environment is, just like astronauts go through, just like pilots go through,
Right.
what is it going to feel like, or how close can I get you to what it's going to be in the real world? So we do a lot of that internally as opposed to hiring outside consultants.
But for smaller folks, they're going to have to hire out. And I think let's talk about the situation here. The estimate right now is there are 114,000 businesses that at the moment you believe are going to require CMMC level 2. Is that right?
According to 48 CFR Part 204, the number is 118,289. So 35% of the entire defense industrial base. So out of the 337,968 that they say are part of the defense industrial base, 118,000 are going to need a CMMC level 2 by a C3 PAO, and 3,380 of them are going to need a CMMC level 3.
Holy gee. Okay. Let's
So those
not
numbers are
give
quite
people
a
the
bit different than what
heebie-jeebies.
we expected.
I can't talk about level 3. I think there's going to be people here who are going to have a heart attack. Let's keep it on level 2. And now the problem though is that there are 114,000 companies or 118, excuse me. I don't know why I keep saying 118 that are going to need the level 2, but how many assessors are there right now?
Today we have 81 C3 PAOs.
Okay.
That means that every C3 PAO would have to complete 487 assessments per year to meet that demand, because that takes the entire thing, divides it by 3, and if you do a third of them every year, so it's a get
in the assessor business, folks. If anyone's thinking,
get into the assessment pipeline, engage with your C3 PAO early, get in the pipeline, because I foresee a backlog.
Yep. Okay. So Michael, let's talk about that, because you just hired yours. How many quotes did you get? How hard was it to decide? Were the prices all over the map? Like, what can you tell us about that selection process that you just went through?
Sure. We reached out to, I believe, 4 different firms. The prices were across the spectrum, from the high 30K to just under 70K.
Okay.
For an assessment. We ended up picking someone in the middle, not just because of the price. Basically, it's the questions that they asked, the approach that they took. It was you could do this as a factory, right? You could do this as a mass produced sort of thing if you wanted to churn through. You do 2 assessments a day like some sort of maniac, but it was clear that they took a different approach, right? They're like, we're going to do this properly. We're going to, we're here to help you achieve this status. Let's partner up and do that. That's the approach they took, and that's what gave us the comfort level. They knew what they were doing and would do it properly.
And I think in some proposals we had heard that you had like some cancellation fees. So everyone not just but the one you went through, you believe does not have one you chose. But
No.
in some of the proposals, it was like if you cancel within this month, there's a fee. If you cancel within this period, there's another fee. So just when you schedule, you better be serious, is I think though the message, right? Because of this demand. If
Yeah,
you schedule
100%.
it, do not back out, right?
You could miss, yeah, if you miss your original projected date, I mean, you could be months and months away from the next opportunity. And I can see the point from the assessor's point of view. It's like
Right.
there's this huge backlog of things, and we can't wait around for you to
Correct.
do whatever it is that you're trying to do.
So we have amazing questions in the chat. They're a little bit all over the map, so I'm going to jump around here. So Josh has put in, if a part drawing is, and I've had this come up in conversation I've had, if a part drawing is considered CUI, is the physical part depicted in that drawing considered CUI, i.e. would video footage and photos of that part then become derived CUI?
So I can take that one.
Yep.
So now, yes, it's going to be CUI, but it's not going to be in scope for DFARS because it's a deliverable. So there's, you are going to have a lot of CUI in your product that is a deliverable, but it's not going to be subject to the same regulatory requirements because it is going to be owned by the government at that point, as opposed to being part of your covered contractor information system, which is the requirement for CMMC.
Got it. Okay. We have another question in here that has got two hearts. So this one's like this one they like here. Can I ask about derived data? This is another. If we have document provided to us with CUI data, then anything pulled from that document and used in another document now makes CUI as well. So I think this is a similar question, but CUI document is received, provides dimensions of widget. We put those in a CAD drawing. Then is the CAD document now CUI? It was just what you answered, right? Your answer before applies for that, right, Brett?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that's the part about portion marking that I was making earlier, is that you have to make an assumption and use your SCG, use your security classification guide as your primer for this, along with your DD254, if you happen to have a DD254, because not all contracts will have one. It's only required today if there's any classified information, but there's talk that they're going to start issuing DD254 for all contracts, but the FAR CUI rule could come in there and actually add some different concepts to what is and what is not, and how CUI is identified within your contract.
That leads us into a great question here in the chat from Paul. Have Boeing or Rolls-Royce received any information that DoD on when they can expect to see certification requirements in their various contracts? I'm going to modify that. Have you received a requirement yet in a contract?
So I can answer that we've received many 7021 clauses over the last few years that were invalid, and we should not expect a valid CMMC requirement until after November 10th.
Okay, November 10th is the day. Amit, you agree with that?
Yes, and I did have actually in one of the DIP summits, I did talk to Stacy Bojanic, and she said if you see a requirement prior to the 48 CFR going live, you can actually go back to your contracting officer and say this is not valid because the 48 CFR is not live. So you have to go back and look into it, work with the commercial team and the contracting team to kind of go back, this is not valid, right?
But
so
the
after
chains
November
come
10th,
off in just what, like 6
you can
weeks?
do a zero. Yeah, you can do a $0 mod, like the contracting officers can do that. Again, work with your commercial and contracting officer.
Okay.
It's a partnership with your customer.
Yeah.
So, if you see a clause that doesn't apply, and, this is outside of anything Christian doctrine related, but if you see a clause that doesn't apply, such as the 7021 clause over the last 5 years, then you need to gently but firmly push back, because up until that 48 CFR goes live, there's no way to actually meet those requirements. So by them putting in the clause, they've put you in a situation where you can't accept it because you can't meet it.
Got it. Okay. Now we have another backlog question, but I think we answered it, but I want to hone in. Michael, this person is asking, like, how long are the waits, right? If we apply now, how long are the waits? And your wait is like, you just booked it this month, September, and your assessment is in April. So it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Is that right?
Yes. So to give you some perspective, we were before we had a contract, before we had everything in place and our gap assessment done, we were still looking at a Q4 assessment in Q4. So we're talking about a span of a few weeks, and you're missing a quarter.
Okay.
And that was before the announcement that things were finalized and we had a fixed date.
So you imagine it's worse out there right now.
It's going to be. I mean, you're talking about summertime or maybe fall of next year,
Jesus Christ.
depending on your status.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons we took advantage of the Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment Program, because this backlog was going to be very real. Being involved in the CMMC ecosystem, we knew that we weren't getting enough C3PAOs. The numbers weren't increasing in accordance with what the demand was going to be in the defense industrial base. So we took advantage of the Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment, which was DCMA DIBCAC and a C3PAO. The C3PAO was in charge of the assessment, the DCMA DIBCAC. It also counted as a high confidence on-site assessment, and you got your CMMC level 2. So we did that last year. June 11th of 2024 was our final.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing, not to create too much panic here, try to reduce the panic, is everybody is not expected to have the certification day one. A lot of companies or the div companies will be expected to have a self-assessment, at least for the phase 1.
Right.
So again, if you're ready for certification, might as well do it. But if you're not ready, you can still do a self-assessment and go through that. And Brett, I don't know if you would agree or disagree with that part.
Well, no, I do agree, and especially in phase 1 of the CMMC level 1 and level 2 self-assessment. The only trouble is one of the things that we didn't expect when the 48 CFR went live, and this number is directly out of that 48 CFR, is that only 6,759 is their estimate of how many companies will be able to self-assess at level 2.
Yep.
So less than 2% of all contracts will be able to self-assess at level 2.
That's important. Okay.
And they also put in that caveat that the DoD reserves the right to pull the requirement for a C3PO assessment forward into phase 1. They left themselves breathing room, but then they also stated in their memo that they don't want to use that.
Yeah, that seems
we also
nasty.
When we also have a situation like you may have seen what called the Golden Dome of America memo, where Ms. Arrington has stated that the Golden Dome of America may include requirements for NIST 800-172.
True.
So pulling that without calling it CMMC level 3, but those requirements could be a contractual obligation as opposed to a regulatory requirement.
Right.
Okay, so this is the first time I'm hearing Golden Dome of America. So on to my team out there, just so you know, we will work on an article for all of your newsletters to go out on this Golden Dome of America. Just because I first of all, who can resist a headline with Golden Dome of America? So we'll let's step back just a little bit though. We've had the privilege, thanks to our work with Rolls-Royce, to talk with suppliers in the supply chain, and one of the overarching things is we have no idea if this is going to matter for us. Is this going to actually get us new business, or is this going to actually help us, or is this just going to be a major pain in the you know what, and it's going to just we're never going to see a benefit from this. What of being maybe even a first mover. So I'd love for you all to talk, maybe Michael, starting with you, about the ROI, and assure people that, well, it's a requirement, so it's hard to say it's going to boost you, but what do you think on that? How do you think about it from a return on investment standpoint?
It can simultaneously be a requirement and a pain in the rear.
Yeah.
And it's almost certainly going to be true. Look, we're not going to stop making war machines. Right. So if you're going to be in that business, you have to comply. It's that simple. So for everybody who's thinking, well, that's a small part of my business, I'll go get other business. Everybody's thinking that, right?
Right.
So the people who are going to take advantage and reap the benefits are the ones who are going to say, you know what, I'm going to go in this other direction because whether you're waving the flag or not, this is a business opportunity because the number of people available to participate is going to shrink. That's a given. So that means more opportunity, more bites at the metaphorical pie for those who are left over. Yeah, we can argue about, is this an unfunded mandate? Is this necessarily fair? Is the left hand and the right hand of the department not working together? Because this is all stick, right? This is all expense on somebody else's. This is money you have to spend. There's no help from the government. There's no help from the primes. There's no help from that you could do things through taxes. You could do things through rebate. You could do all sorts of financial engineering to help make this more palatable to people. But the fact of the matter is, this is the basement, right? Compliance is not security, but compliance gets you to a level set, and we can work on improving the security as things go. And the side benefits of like understanding what your supply chain actually looks like and how deep it is, right? Because you're going to have to cement these relationships. You can't like random invoice from somebody who makes a part that goes into a component and off of that, because that's a concern too, right? It's like, who's making these things?
Right.
So
there are some perhaps good business practices that will come out of this. And if you get through, you're going to face less competition because there are going to be some companies that are going to drop out of the defense industrial base because of this.
Absolutely. And I think the government, if it wanted to be helpful here, it would do a little more in the form of guidance, templates, plain English language, making things like, we've all worked in the government. We understand the language and the lexicon, but most people do. Of the 118,000 odd folks who are doing this, these are not large organizations. These are not people who are familiar with this world. We need to make it a little bit easier for them to, and I'm not saying cut and paste, but getting as close to cut and paste as possible. So at least so they get to a certain point and they realize, okay, we take the drudgery out of this thing, and now let's focus on the stuff that actually matters.
Well,
I can see why the cost comes.
There's a question in here about training. Will the DoD have updated CUI training available before November 10th, or is there known date is when they plan to update that? This is from Christopher in the chat.
One would hope.
Okay. This is a great question from Todd. There are a number of companies that advertise checklists and software to accomplish certification, but they are not RPOs or C3PAOs. Is it plausible to achieve CMMC 2.0 certification on your own? We said that no, it is not. Only about 6,000 companies are expected to be able to do that. But or is it recommended to engage in RPO? Does Boeing have a recommended list of C3PAOs or RPOs like specific to Boeing or Rolls-Royce that are part of their approved vendor or supplier list? Are you able to advise your supply chain, like, we recommend these? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I would say go with the Cyber AV marketplace, because both the RPO and the C3PO, they have to get certified and trained by the Cyber AV. So don't go with somebody who's just advertising that, although they cannot, and most of the companies don't, false. But again, don't fall in the trap. That's the right place to search for the right RPO and talk to at least through 2 and 3 and see what their approach is. The biggest thing I've seen is the approach on basically carving out what your scope looks like, what your boundary looks like, and don't inflate it. Try to shrink as much as possible. So understand what your COI assets are before you even engage with them, so that you can maximize their efforts and minimize the cost.
And that's very helpful. But wouldn't a safe bet to be just like to ask their prime, like, who did you use? And just use, is there some benefits of using the same assessors and RPOs as their primes? Like, would those places then have additional knowledge that would be helpful, or no?
Again, I would say the answer depends. Because again, it all depends on the affordability, availability of these RPOs and C3POs. Again, the ones we picked are pretty big, can accumulate all of that workload. But again, it all depends on what fits your bill, right?
Got it.
And which is very important, because again, cost is a major implication for a lot of the suppliers. So again, assess what is best for you.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because, the old saying, your mileage may vary. The fact that Boeing chose a C3PAO based on their knowledge of the OSI model and how a layer 4 switched global MPLS works is not going to apply to everyone.
I get it. Okay.
I would like to be very cautious about recommending someone, because if it doesn't work out the same way for you that it did for us, then then you're upset with us. But
Right.
I completely agree. The Cyber AV marketplace is exactly where you want to go. Look under there. It's very easy to search
Yeah.
for RPOs and for C3PAOs, depending on what level you want. The C3PAOs, they are certified. They've gone through a CMMC level 2 themselves. The RPOs are going to be focused on the consulting aspect of it. So yeah, and to your point is, outside of Boeing, I had one of my compatriots ask me, "Hey, I've got one of my clients who's using this company. Do you know anything about them, whatnot?" I went out to the marketplace. They weren't there. I looked as a C3PO, looked as an RPO, etc. Then I went out to their website, and yeah, they were advertising
Advertising it.
CMMC services
Right.
and the 5 levels of CMMC. So
Be careful,
their
folks.
information
Be
was
careful.
4 years out of date.
Yeah.
They were obviously not the right company for
Yep.
to be using, because they didn't understand CMMC themselves. And
Yeah.
the C3PAOs and the RPOs, they have to sign the Code of Professional Conduct.
Okay.
Highly, highly recommend only engaging with companies in the Cyber AV marketplace.
Wonderful. Watch
It's
out for
there
snake
for a
oil.
reason.
Okay. I'm glad Wesley asked this question. As the DIB strengths, how are primes planning to maneuver the loss of sole single source, small, medium, and 5th, 6th, 7th tier suppliers? How are you? Do you worry about that? I guess you all are in the cyber section, so maybe operate. I don't know how close tied into operations you are to answer that question, but do you want to take that one? It's a tough one.
Yeah. Go ahead, Amit.
I would say yes, that's a worry, right?
Yeah.
And again, the answer, it depends, because if we have a sole supplier, not kind of certified or self-assessed, again, we have to report it either to our prime or to the DoD directly, right? And again, it's more about the risk assessment, working with the DoD or the prime and saying, until we look for a reliable replacement for this company, right, or the part, what do we do, right? Because you
Yep.
cannot stop the whole production. So again, I think it goes back to the appetite and the risk and all of that kind of discussing with the prime and the DoD, because per the rule, we have, like, being the prime or the sub, you have to report the compliance of your level ones and keep that in track.
Yeah.
And what happens if they hold the patent on that
Yep.
on that part? So you can't just ask somebody else to make it. Being a sole
Right.
source supplier, because that's why they are a sole source supplier, because they invented it. So
Right.
there are some, there are obviously some concerns there. I have another comrade of mine that deals with someone who is in that situation, and they will never be able to be CMMC level 2 compliant. So they went back to pen and paper. They went back to having couriers deliver information. They disconnected the
Lord
computer.
God.
They're going back to snail mail for
Michael
because
Tanji
they
right now
can't pass CMMC level 2.
He's like, I could see him just like as the, MxD, manufacturing times digital, right? So I could see him just kind of like,
Yeah, take
I
the
don't want
X
to
and the
hear
D
that.
off of there and just leave the manufacturing part. But yeah, that's what they're doing. That is their path to success. Is it's a quote unquote mom and pop in a garage that makes this part. Well, there
Just
is
take
no
out all the computers.
take all the computers out. They don't need them. They hand manufacture the parts, and so it's a low rate production. It's not it's not something that's coming off an assembly line. But when you're talking about very complex weapons platforms, they're at a low rate production already. There's only so many KC-46 a days that can roll off the assembly line every month, just as an example.
More amazing questions in the chat. I am loving this chat. So thank you for participating and helping each other in the chat. Brett, you and I had talked about this even earlier, so let's do this one. how should we be keeping up with subcontractor certification? You're like, there is a massive business opportunity. This is literally the question. I will say that there's a massive business opportunity for someone who to build a software system that can do this. But this person is clearly a sub who has, subs of that sub. Do we need a copy of their certification? Should we be sending out some new very special questionnaire? And if so, is there a template? What will auditors be asking for from the standpoint? Help me out, folks, on this one.
Yeah. So there's two parts to this. One is your annual reps and certs. So your representations and certifications of what am I compliant with? Now, with the DFARS 252204 7012 clause, the 7020 clause, your section 889, all of those things, that is just self-attestation. But of course, the CMMC level 2, you have to provide proof. The words they use in the 48 CFR are screenshot, but your certificate, your printout from SPRS. I mean, screenshot on for me is the last thing that I want. I want the PDF printout from SPRS because then I know exactly what I'm looking for, and it's going to look exactly the same on everybody's. It's going to look exactly the same on, there's no URL in the top of the window from the screenshot, et cetera. So that's what I would want to see. Now, the challenge is going to be with a large supply chain is that everybody has their own UID. And if to add a cage code to your UID, you have to get another certification and another UID. So you're going to have conditional certificates that are going to expire within 180 days that become final. Everybody's going to be at different times of the year. Your level 1s are going to have to give you every year. Your level 2s are going to have to give you their affirming officials signature every year. They're going to have to update that anytime there's changes. And if you're dealing with a supply base of 15,000 suppliers, you're talking at least one change per year. And you figure it's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes to process each one, scrape that information off, put it into your database, start proactively calling the supplier who's going to expire in 30 days. This is a massive undertaking. It is. When we talk about an unfunded mandate, I don't worry too much about the unfunded mandate of getting the certification. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's the way this is eventually going to go.
Right.
But the amount of headcount and overhead labor that it's going to take just to keep up with all the UIDs of a large supply chain, that's an unfunded mandate. That's going to cause everybody's rates to go up all the way from your tier 7 to your prime. They are going to have an increase in cost, and the government's going to say, well, why does this airplane cost 20% more now than it did last year? Because of this. All of that is going to stack on top of each other. It's not just one firm fixed price that you say that it's going to do X, Y, or Z. Everybody is going to have their quote unquote middleman costs that are going to now be added in to their rate. And that's just going to get passed all the way up and eventually to the taxpayer.
Well, Brett, this is what I'm going to say on this is that I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at Chicago Booth at the University of Chicago. I teach building a new venture. And I might have my students be like, this is when I say you've got to start a business that solves a real problem, a real pain for a real and defined group of people. This is exactly the kind of pain that we're talking about.
We cannot farm SPRS on our own. We only have access to our own information, or in some cases where we've had a partnership with some other companies that they give us access to their SPRS because it's our SSP, but they're the prime. But that's just there's no way for us to do a validation of all of these CMMC UIDs and what are their dates. This is going to be a very manual process, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Yellow with just one final comment to close this out. I'm going to say that, all of you are here because you receive newsletters as part of this program. We have 4 teams in this program. We have Rolls-Royce and Boeing obviously represented here, but we also have Oshkosh and DMG Mori. And we want to know, and I'll put my email in the chat, if you achieve level 2, only because we want to celebrate you publicly. We want to, now we don't need any, high sensitive information or anything, but we want to write about your journey. We want to tell other suppliers about your journey. We want to share your lessons learned, and we want to celebrate those of you who have gone through this very, as what Michael, you said, tedious process, right? So, I want to thank again everyone in the chat who has been so helpful for each other and for me to add in fantastic questions. Yella, take it away.
Sure will. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you so much to Brett, to Amit, to Mike as well. I didn't at the outset indicate, but just to share that MxD is a Department of Defense funded institute. And so the work we're all doing, the best practices we're sharing, the Q&A, all of it is really not only in support of our members and our industry, but it's really in support of literally our national security. So I couldn't thank you enough for all that you're doing to help us there and to help also mitigate some of the disruption that we are going to be feeling in the industrial base. So what we will do is this webinar is recorded. It will be distributed through the newsletters that you all are receiving. If you are not, please also reach out to Melissa's email and make sure that you are on those newsletters. And then I think another really good idea, and we can talk through that a little bit, is really to assemble some of the Q&A and have that as a easy reference, just because this has been a really active group. So thank you so much for all of this. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing all of your insights. Tremendously helpful.
Thanks to MxD. Okay, see you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.